You know, you think a foreign policy is supposed to protect a nation's own interests, right? But what happens when that policy is actually designed for an empire on the other side of the planet? Today, we're going to dive into the foreign policy of British India, who it really served, and more importantly, who paid the price. It's a pretty basic question when you think about it. When a government makes deals or goes to war, who are they doing it for? The country? The people? Keep that question in your head as we go through this, because it's central to the whole story.
Well, for British India, the answer was crystal clear. Every single decision, every treaty signed, every conflict fought, it was all about what the British Empire needed. The foreign policy wasn't for India at all. It was for the empire.
Okay, so if the policy was for the empire, what exactly were those imperial interests? Well, it turns out it all pretty much boiled down to two major goals that drove everything they did.
And here they are. It all came down to these two pillars: strategic defense and economic promotion. Let's break down what each of those actually meant on the ground.
First up, strategic defense. The best way to think about this is like building a giant fortress around India, which was the crown jewel of the empire. The number one goal was to keep any other big European players, like Russia or France, as far away as possible.
And then you've got economic promotion. This was all about money and power. It meant using India as a massive launchpad to push British business and trade all across Asia and Africa. It was a classic 1-2 punch: military security backed up by economic dominance, and all of it for Britain's benefit.
So the British knew what they wanted, but how were they going to achieve it? Well, this is where things took a pretty dramatic turn, shifting from just being about trade to being about straight-up conquest.
You can really see the evolution here. The British didn't just show up as conquerors. They came as traders, looking to do business. But over time, they got deeper and deeper into local politics until, bam, they were in control of the whole subcontinent. And even that wasn't enough. Once India was locked down, British ambition just kept going. To secure those strategic and economic goals we talked about, they started pushing outwards, way beyond India's natural borders. And as you can probably guess, this led to one conflict after another with neighboring countries. Now, all this constant expansion and fighting, it wasn't free, not by a long shot. Which brings us to the most important question of all: who was actually footing the bill? This is where we get to the heart of our story, the real hidden price of this imperial policy. Here's the brutal math of it all. For every goal the British had, there was a heavy cost for India. The empire wanted security for its crown jewel. That was paid for with the lives of Indian soldiers. The empire wanted to make a profit. That was paid for by the money of Indian taxpayers. And look, the sources we're drawing from don't mince words about this at all. It says it right there, clear as day. The cost of its implementation was borne by India. There was absolutely no confusion about who was expected to pay up. So just how staggering was that cost? Take a look at this number. Over 50%. Just let that sink in for a moment. Over half of what, you might ask? Well, here's your answer. In the year 1904, over half, more than 50%, of India's entire government revenue was spent on the army. And remember, this wasn't an army to defend India for Indians. Nope. This was an army to fight the empire's battles all across Asia and Africa. So you see, it was a total double whammy for India. There was the devastating human cost, with Indian soldiers dying in faraway conflicts that had nothing to do with them. And then there was the crushing financial cost, with Indian taxpayers funding a massive military machine for their imperial rulers. And a policy like this doesn't just end. It doesn't disappear. It leaves scars. It leaves a deep and costly legacy, with echoes we can still hear today. So at the end of the day, what was the foreign policy of British India really all about? It was never about India. It was a tool, plain and simple, designed for the benefit of the British Empire. A tool that was built and paid for with Indian blood and Indian treasure. And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. This isn't just ancient history. The borders that were drawn, the conflicts that were fought, all to serve those imperial goals, they helped create the very map of modern Asia. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How do the policies of the past continue to shape the world we live in right now?